The philosophers. Perhaps there has been no one group of individuals more responsible for the state of our world today. This secret organization, founded in 1918 after the First World War, and consisting of the most powerful minds of the United States, China, and the Soviet Union, instigated a colossal chain of events that would eventually plunge the world into an eternity of violent conflict. That, of course, was never their initial intention. The philosophers began as a group of considerably wealthy men who called themselves the Wise Men's Committee. They were a fraternity of scholars and politicians who believed very strongly in a unified world of peace, driven by intellectual pursuits to benefit mankind and create everlasting prosperity. These men had a vision for the world and wished to see it become a reality, and so they reached out and gathered more like-minded individuals from their respective countries to create a new organization with this goal in mind. Thus, the philosophers were born, and they would use their power and influence to steer the world away from warfare and embrace universal peace. Their efforts, however, were hindered by their own human nature. Internal conflicts arose within the philosophers due to power struggles and differences of opinion. While some saw one path toward world peace, others followed a different road, and despite their common goal, they failed to compromise and began feuding. The wise men turned against each other, causing the philosophers to become corrupt. They even went so far as killing those who refused to see things their way, but in their attempts to cleanse their organization of those who would not see reason, they spelled their own demise. The last original member of the philosophers was killed in the 1930s after exposing the organization for what it now was to his young daughter. He had taught his daughter the values the philosophers once stood for, but now that everything had crumbled beneath the depravity of man's pride, he revealed to her what was happening with the hope that she would learn from the mistakes of his associates and strive not to make them herself. The philosophers' original goals became skewed by those who took power after the wise men were killed off, turning what was once the pursuit of peace into no more than a conquest for greater wealth and power. This led to each branch of the philosophers controlling the governments of their respective countries, and as the reach of the philosophers spread across more and more nations, their constant dissemination of conflict led to endless cycles of war, allowing the philosophers to bend the global economy to their will and amass unspeakable riches. The philosophers had found the answer to ultimate power in the form of dollars, and there was no better way to gain more power through money than by manipulating the world into a state of constant war. In 1939, the philosophers had escalated the tension and conflict between nations to such a degree that a second world war began. This war marked the very beginning of one woman's rise to national fame and also infamy. The woman known only as the Joy, named so due to the unparalleled bliss she felt while in the midst of battle, also happened to be the daughter of the last founding member of the philosophers. The ideals her father had taught her when she was a child had faded from her mind as she grew up in a world where war was the norm and violence was the answer to every conflict. She lost sight of the values her father's organization was built upon, just as the organization had itself, adopting a soldier's life of endless war. The Joy served on the British Army's lay force during World War II, where she met a man named David O. The two became friends and participated in various raids in Egypt, along with another mutual friend who was tragically killed on December 30th of 1941. Knowing the Joy was quite close with this man, David personally delivered the fallen soldier's winged dagger pin to her. Though he had no earthly way of knowing it, This simple pin would one day become the instrument of David's downfall. Her comrade's death fueled the Joy's fighting spirit all the more as she continued to fight alongside David in the Lay Force and later the British Special Air Service. The philosopher's wealth now totaled over $100 billion. This enormous fortune was known as the philosopher's legacy, and they used this money to develop new forms of deadly weaponry, including nuclear weapons and superhumans, to aid the Allies during the war. Among these superhumans were the group known as the Cobra unit, consisting of 6 individuals who were already highly skilled fighters. The Joy left the British Army to assemble this unit in 1942, and many of its members were enhanced with special abilities that coincided with the emotions they carried with them into battle. The Pain was the Cobra unit's Hornet soldier, and was infected with a strain of parasites the philosophers had harnessed that allowed him to receive huge surges of adrenaline and control swarms of insects through pheromone secretion. The Fear was the Spider soldier, and was known for the terror he instilled in his victims on the battlefield. The philosophers had him undergo extensive surgery, which gave him double-jointed limbs, a forked tongue, and yellow reptilian eyes. The End was the oldest member of the Cobras, and was known as the Ancient Sniper. He was born in the 1860s and was a veteran of numerous wars. Having greatly impressed the philosophers, he was granted photosynthetic abilities that allowed him to absorb life and energy from the sun through a specific strain of the parasites that gave the Pain his abilities. The End embodied true oblivion when he engaged in battle, blocking out everything in existence except his next target. The Fury, also known as the Flame Soldier, was one of the only members of Cobra who was not granted superhuman abilities, but was still inducted into the Cobra unit for his furious nature in battle. He had an affinity for fire, seeing it as a visual manifestation of the rage he felt on the battlefield, and so he chose a flamethrower as his weapon of choice. The Sorrow was the spirit medium soldier of the Cobra unit, and he possessed the ability to assume the combat skills of deceased soldiers by channeling their spirits through his own body. Though he served the Joy faithfully, he experienced great sadness at the death and misery caused by war, thus earning him his codename. The Sorrow and the Joy became very close and fell in love with each other, which led to the Joy becoming pregnant with their child. The Joy had learned she was pregnant in the midst of a mission to assassinate Hungarian scientist John van Neumann, who was believed to be a valuable asset to the Axis powers. This revelation was a distraction during the mission, and it caused her to sustain a mild brain injury. The Joy gave birth to her child by C-section on D-Day in the middle of the battlefield, a son, whom she named Adamska. The baby was immediately taken into the custody of the philosophers, who refused to relinquish him to the Joy, claiming her way of life made her unfit to mother a child. World War II came to an end on September 2nd, 1945, shortly after the United States dropped atomic bombs supplied to them by the philosophers on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was agreed that the philosophers' legacy was to be redistributed amongst the philosophers after the Axis powers were defeated. But the philosophers began feuding again, with each branch attempting to outpace the other's technological advancements, believing that they could do more good for the world if they were in control of the legacy. Boris Volgin, the man responsible for laundering the philosopher's legacy during the war, stole the legacy for himself to ensure the Soviet branch of the philosophers retained total control of the organization. Boris kept the legacy safe by scattering the money in various banks in different countries all across the world, with the transactions being saved on a single microfilm. This microfilm alone became the philosopher's legacy itself. Boris's actions set the stage for a new kind of war,